A single spear decided the fate of empires. For centuries, this relic has been shrouded in legend and bloodshed. This is the story of the Holy Lance, the weapon that pierced the side of Christ and was said to grant its possessor invincibility. By the end of this journey, you will know the full scope of its incredible secret powers, from healing the sick to commanding armies and even altering history itself. How could a simple object channel such impossible abilities? What was the true source of its world-changing force? Why does the legend of the Spear of Destiny continue to haunt our modern world? On a hill outside Jerusalem, a Roman soldier performed a simple, grim duty. The centurion, known to later tradition as Longinus, thrust his spear into the side of the crucified Jesus. In the Gospel of John, this act was presented as a final confirmation of death, yet for countless believers, it became something infinitely more profound. This was not merely a soldier following orders. According to ancient scripture, this moment fulfilled a prophecy that not a bone of his body would be broken. The flow of blood and water from the wound was seen as a miraculous sign, instantly sanctifying the weapon that caused it. The soldier's spear was no longer a standard issue piece of Roman military equipment. It had become a direct witness to the divine, a physical object that had touched the very essence of Christ. It was now the Holy Lance. The early veneration for this relic began to grow almost immediately. Stories circulated among the first Christian communities about the centurion himself, who, upon witnessing the events that followed the strike, was said to have declared, "Truly this was the Son of God." His act of violence was reinterpreted as one of profound revelation. The lance was believed to be imbued with a tangible piece of that sanctity, having been bathed in the blood of the Messiah. This was the seed of its legendary power. Apocryphal texts and fervent oral traditions carried the story forward, elaborating on the fate of both the man and the weapon. They transformed a moment of death into the birth of an object believed to hold the very power of salvation. How could an object so connected to such a pivotal event not be charged with an otherworldly force? Its journey from a tool of execution to a vessel of divine energy had begun, setting the stage for a legacy that would captivate emperors and shape the destiny of nations for 1,000 years. This belief in the lance's power transformed it from a holy relic into the ultimate prize of conquest. The legend was simple and intoxicating. Whoever held the Holy Lance and understood its secrets could not be defeated in battle. This was not merely a superstition. It was a conviction that shaped the ambitions of kings and the fate of empires. The spear was seen as a conduit for divine will, a physical key that unlocked victory itself. It meant your army was not just skilled or lucky, but blessed, fighting with the literal force of heaven behind them. One of the earliest and most powerful claimants to this legacy was the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great. Before the pivotal battle of the Milvian Bridge in the year 312, Constantine reportedly had a vision. He saw a cross of light in the heavens and heard the words, "In this sign conquer." While the famous story centers on the cross, later traditions wove the Holy Lance into his narrative. The idea was that his subsequent, unlikely victory and his conversion to Christianity were part of the same divine intervention. His triumph was interpreted as proof that God had granted him favor, and the lance became a symbol of that unbreakable covenant. To possess it was to hold a contract with the divine, a guarantee that your cause was righteous and your victory assured. This belief went far beyond simple physical protection on the battlefield. It was about legitimacy. A ruler who held the spear of destiny was not just a king. He was a king chosen by God. His victories were not mere military achievements. They were signs of a sacred mandate. This created a terrifyingly powerful idea. The one who controlled the lance could command the destiny of the entire world, steering it toward either glorious salvation or utter ruin. The object itself was thought to be neutral, a pure source of power. Its moral direction depended entirely on the heart of the person who wielded it. A pious emperor could use it to build a holy empire, while a tyrant could use that very same power to unleash darkness across the continents. This is why the chase for the lance became so frantic throughout the centuries. It was not a quest for a simple trophy. It was a desperate gamble for the ultimate authority, a chance to have history itself bend to your will. The question hung in the air for every ambitious ruler who learned the legend. Would you be the one to finally unlock its full potential, and would you use that power for good or for evil? The destiny of the world, it was said, rested on that single, piercing point. Centuries after Constantine, the legend of the lance found its ultimate champion in the towering figure of Charlemagne. He was not merely a king, but an emperor who forged a new Roman Empire through sheer force of will and countless battles. And according to the unshakable legend, he never rode to war without the holy lance by his side. It is said he carried the sacred spear into 47 major conflicts and never suffered a single defeat. Every victory, from the plains of Italy to the forests of Saxony, was seen as a direct result of this divine partnership. The lance was no longer just a weapon of victory, it was the very foundation of an empire. Charlemagne understood its power was not merely military but spiritual. His possession of the relic was the ultimate proof that his rule was sanctioned by God himself, a direct line from the divine to the imperial throne. This created a terrifyingly effective political tool. To challenge Charlemagne was not just to challenge a man, it was to challenge the will of heaven. The spear became the physical symbol of this covenant, a guarantee that his expanding empire was a holy mission. Yet the legend holds a chilling, prophetic end. As the aged emperor lay dying, the story goes that he accidentally dropped the holy lance. In that moment, the divine favor that had shielded him for a lifetime seemed to slip from his grasp. His vast empire, so meticulously built around the power of the spear, did not long survive him. It fragmented among his squabbling grandsons, just as the fallen lance had slipped from his hand. This was seen as no mere coincidence. It was a divine portent, a clear sign that the power giveth and the power taketh away. Because of Charlemagne, the spear of destiny became permanently welded to the concept of imperial rule. For the Holy Roman emperors who followed him for centuries, possessing the lance was a non-negotiable requirement. The actual coronation ceremony was not complete without it. The physical transfer of the spear from one ruler to the next was the most powerful moment of the ritual. It was not a crown or a scepter that truly sealed the deal, but this ancient iron point. It symbolized the direct inheritance of that same divine mandate, the unbroken chain of holy authority that began with Longinus and was proven on the battlefields of Charlemagne. The emperor did not just rule by law or by birthright. He ruled because he held the key to destiny itself. This object, which had witnessed the death of a god, was now the very thing that made an emperor. The legend of the spear did not die with Charlemagne. It found its way into the hands of another emperor, Otto the Great, at a moment when his world was on the brink of collapse. In the summer of 955, a massive force of Magyar horsemen swept into Central Europe, laying waste to the German lands. These warriors were the terror of the age, and they had cornered Otto's army on the plain of Lechfeld. The situation was dire, and defeat seemed inevitable. But as his troops prepared for what many believed would be their final stand, Otto the Great did something extraordinary. He dismounted before his men and raised the holy lance high for all to see. This was not just a general holding a relic, it was a public declaration of divine support, a visible sign that God was on their side. The sight of that ancient iron point gleaming in the sun ignited a fire in the hearts of his soldiers. They were no longer just fighting for their king. They were fighting as soldiers of Christ. The ensuing battle was a brutal, day-long struggle, but Otto's forces, against all odds, emerged utterly victorious. They shattered the Magyar army, capturing their leaders and ending the invasions for good. This was not seen as a simple military victory, it was a miracle. Chroniclers of the time wrote that the victory was granted by God himself, channeled through the power of the sacred spear in Otto's hand. The Battle of Lechfeld instantly became a foundational myth for the German nation and a cornerstone for the Holy Roman Empire. Otto had not only saved his kingdom, he had proven the lance's power for a new generation. His triumph was masterfully used to cement the political and spiritual authority of the empire. By wielding the spear, Otto positioned himself as the direct successor to Charlemagne and Constantine, the latest in an unbroken line of God-chosen rulers. The message was clear: the empire that held the lance was the empire that held divine favor. Its survival was not just a matter of politics, but a matter of prophecy. The spear was no longer merely a key to battlefield victory. It had become the very soul of a nation, an object whose power could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. What other world-altering moments would hinge on the possession of this single, sacred point? Yet the power of the Holy Lance was not confined to the battlefield. In the quiet of a cathedral, a different kind of miracle was said to unfold. For the sick, the lame, and the dying, the spear offered not victory in war, but victory over death itself. This was the other side of its divine nature, a power of profound healing and restoration. While emperors saw a weapon to command armies, common pilgrims saw a source of miraculous cures. Medieval chronicles are filled with accounts of desperate journeys. People traveled for weeks, sometimes months, to reach the churches where the lance was kept. They believed that simply touching the reliquary that housed the sacred point, or even being in its hallowed presence, could cure diseases that had baffled every physician. The theological foundation for this belief was powerful and direct. It was linked to the very moment of its creation, when blood and water flowed from the side of Christ. In medieval theology, this effusion was not just a biological event. It was seen as the fountain of all grace, a source of both spiritual and physical cleansing. The lance, having been bathed in that sacred flow, was thought to be permanently charged with its life-giving properties. It became a conduit for that same healing energy to enter the world. There are stories of the blind having their sight restored after praying before the relic. Others tell of plague victims covered in sores and given up for dead, who made a complete recovery after a fragment of the lance was brought to their bedside. One famous tale speaks of a knight with a festering, incurable wound who was healed instantly upon touching the spear's tip. These were not quiet, private miracles. They were public spectacles that fueled the fervent veneration of thousands. For every emperor who wielded the lance to forge an empire, there were 1,000 ordinary souls who saw it as their only hope. This dual nature made the relic uniquely powerful. It was a symbol of divine authority for the high and mighty, and a direct line to divine mercy for the lowly and suffering. The Spear of Destiny was not just about commanding history. It was also about overcoming the very human struggles of pain, sickness, and despair. How could an object associated with such a violent death come to represent the promise of life? The answer lay in that paradoxical moment at the foot of the cross, where an instrument of execution became, for millions, a key to salvation. But the most terrifying test of the Holy Lance's healing power arrived in the 14th century, a horror known as the Black Death. As this invisible scourge swept across Europe, wiping out entire villages and turning cities into charnel houses, the desperate populace turned to their most powerful spiritual defenders. In this atmosphere of sheer panic, the Holy Lance was mobilized not just for individual cures, but as a shield for entire communities. City magistrates and bishops would organize grand, solemn processions. The relic, encased in its golden reliquary, would be carried through the streets by the most pious clergy, followed by a throng of weeping, praying citizens. They believed its sacred presence could literally purify the air, driving out the miasma of disease that was thought to carry the plague. The very path the procession took was considered sanctified, a barrier against the encroaching death. Imagine the scene, the rhythmic chanting of monks, the smell of incense fighting the stench of decay, and the sight of that ancient iron point held aloft against a backdrop of boarded-up homes and mass graves. For those watching, it was not a superstitious spectacle. It was an act of collective survival, a direct plea to heaven for mercy. The lance became a powerful psychological anchor in a world drowning in fear. When medicine and reason offered no answers, it provided a tangible symbol of hope, a reminder that a power greater than the plague was at work. This belief was codified in special prayers and masses composed specifically for the occasion. These texts, some of which survive today, directly invoke the Holy Lance as an intercessor. One common prayer begged that, just as the lance had pierced Christ's side to release a flood of grace, it might now pierce the cloud of pestilence hanging over the city, releasing a flood of healing. People wore lead amulets stamped with an image of the spear, believing the symbol itself carried protective virtue. The relic was more than an object of faith. It was a communal protector, a spiritual fortress wall. Its power was seen as the only force capable of repelling a disaster that felt both random and demonic. In an age of incomprehensible mortality, the spear of destiny offered a thread of divine logic, a promise that even in the face of such devastation, humanity was not abandoned. Beyond its power to heal and protect, the Holy Lance was also believed to unlock the mind itself. Legends insist the relic could grant its true possessor the gift of prophecy, a direct line to divine insight. For a ruler, this was the ultimate advantage. It was one thing to have an army that could not be defeated. It was something else entirely to see the future, to understand God's plan well enough to shape it. Tales from medieval chronicles speak of emperors experiencing profound visions while in prayer before the spear. They would receive cryptic warnings of impending betrayals, see the outcomes of distant battles, or gain sudden clarity on matters of state that had baffled their entire councils. This was not seen as simple cleverness or good strategy. It was interpreted as the lance acting as a key, unlocking a higher state of perception and allowing a mortal man to glimpse the divine blueprint. The decisions made from these visions were considered infallible because they were thought to come not from human reason but from a direct understanding of God's will. A king who possessed the lance was not just a commander, he was a seer steering his kingdom with a foresight that felt almost supernatural. Mystical texts from the era wove this clairvoyant ability deeply into the spear's mythology. One popular story tells of a saint who, while guarding the relic, fell into a trance and accurately prophesied the rise and fall of 3 future empires. Another chronicle describes an emperor who, on the eve of a critical diplomatic meeting, dreamed of a specific symbol after touching the lance's reliquary. He took it as a sign, changed his entire approach, and secured a peace treaty that lasted for generations. This aspect transformed the object from a simple tool of power into a source of transcendent wisdom. It meant that the true master of the Holy Lance did not merely react to events. He anticipated them. He could navigate the treacherous currents of politics and war with a confidence that seemed otherworldly because he believed he was aligning his actions with a cosmic purpose. How many wars were avoided because of a vision? How many alliances were forged from a divine warning? The power to see tomorrow was, in many ways, a greater force than any army. But such a profound ability could not remain hidden forever in royal treasuries. Its very existence demanded a final, physical home, a resting place worthy of its world-changing legacy. This authority to see the future was useless without the power to command the present, and for that, the Holy Lance became the ultimate political weapon. Its true power was not just in winning battles, but in crowning kings. For the Holy Roman emperors, the physical act of holding the lance during their coronation was as vital as the crown being placed on their head. It was the moment that transformed a man into a ruler chosen by God. The ceremony was a carefully staged drama of divine approval, and the spear was its most important prop. When a new emperor grasped the relic, he was not just receiving a symbol. He was plugging into a current of sacred authority that stretched back through Charlemagne and Constantine all the way to the foot of the cross itself. This was the living doctrine of translatio imperii, the transfer of empire. The idea was that the mantle of the ancient Roman Caesars, with all its global dominion, had not vanished. It had been passed like a holy baton directly to the Germanic kings who now ruled Central Europe, and the Holy Lance was the ultimate proof of this transfer. It was the tangible, physical evidence that God had sanctioned this new Christian Roman Empire in the heart of Europe. Without it, a coronation felt incomplete, almost illegitimate. The message to every duke, bishop, and foreign ambassador was unmistakable. This man does not rule because his army is strong. He rules because heaven itself has handed him the key to history. This belief fueled some of the most intense conflicts of the Middle Ages. Rival claimants to the imperial throne knew that controlling the lance was more important than controlling the capital city. Wars were fought not over land or gold, but over this single piece of iron. One famous struggle involved the Hohenstaufen Emperor Frederick Barbarossa and his bitter rival, the Pope. The lance became a central pawn in their epic power struggle. For Frederick, securing it was essential to proving his authority was independent of the papacy. He argued that his right to rule came directly from God through the relic, not from any blessing a pope could give or withhold. The very possession of the spear was his divine resume. Later, when the Habsburg dynasty rose to power, they made the lance a cornerstone of their family's legacy. They housed it in their personal treasury in Vienna, treating it not as a religious artifact for all, but as the private source of their dynastic magic. It was their supernatural insurance policy, a guarantee that their bloodline was destined to rule. The object that once offered healing to peasants was now locked away, a state secret that legitimized an entire family's claim to dominate Europe for centuries. How many wars were started, how many treaties broken, all for the chance to hold this one object. The spear of destiny did not just grant victory in battle. It wrote the very script of power, deciding who had the right to sit on a throne and who would be cast aside as a mere pretender. Yet this authority over kings paled before its perceived power over darkness itself. In the medieval mind, the Holy Lance was the ultimate weapon in a cosmic war, a divinely charged artifact capable of vanquishing demons and shattering curses. Its very origin story made it anathema to evil. The moment it pierced Christ's side was not seen as a victory for death, but as the precise instant when death itself was defeated. The lance had drawn the very blood that, according to Christian doctrine, redeemed humanity. It had been present at the pivotal event that broke the power of sin. This made the relic a direct counterforce to any malevolent spirit or dark enchantment. In formal exorcism rites, priests would often invoke the power of the Holy Lance, calling upon its sacred history to command evil entities to depart. The ritual books are explicit. They describe how the demonic was believed to recoil at the very mention of the spear, for it represented the instrument that had sealed its ultimate fate. The name of Longinus, the centurion, was sometimes spoken as a word of power, a reminder of the moment a soldier's act was transformed into a testament of divine truth. This spiritual warfare was not confined to church ceremonies. In folk belief, the lance's protective power was made tangible for everyday life. People would carve its image over their doorways to guard their homes from evil spirits. Travelers carried small amulets shaped like the spearhead, trusting it to ward off the curses of witches or the malevolent gaze of the evil eye. There are accounts of fields being blessed with a relic of the lance to protect the harvest from blight thought to be caused by dark magic. The object that had safeguarded empires was now called upon to protect a single family or a crop of wheat. This belief was powerfully visualized in the religious art of the era. Illuminated manuscripts and stained glass windows frequently depict a stunning scene. The lance of Longinus is shown not only piercing the side of Christ on the cross, but its point is often shown simultaneously transfixing a symbolic representation of evil crouched at the foot of the cross, a serpent, a dragon, or a grotesque demon figure. The message was unmistakable. With a single divine thrust, the spear had wounded both the Savior and Satan, delivering salvation to humanity and a fatal blow to the forces of hell. How could a simple object hold such sway over the unseen world? The answer lies in that powerful medieval logic. The lance was not merely a symbol, it was a vessel permanently imbued with the spiritual energy of the event it had caused. It was considered a piece of heaven's own arsenal, left on earth as a permanent weapon for the forces of light. To hold it, or even to venerate its image, was to arm yourself with a fragment of that final, victorious battle. This understanding elevated the spear of destiny beyond a political tool or a healing relic. It became a key protagonist in the great moral drama of the universe, a tangible reminder that the battle between good and evil had a definitive turning point, and that a single, sacred weapon had been at its very center. This divine weapon soon became a rallying cry for an entire civilization. As the call for the First Crusade echoed across Europe, the Holy Lance transformed from an imperial treasure into a universal symbol of Christian unity. In a continent fractured by petty wars and competing kingdoms, the spear represented a cause greater than any single nation. It was the one relic that every knight from Normandy to Germany could acknowledge as a sign of God's own favor. Pope Urban II, in his fiery sermons, did not merely call for the liberation of Jerusalem. He invoked the legacy of holy warriors like Charlemagne and the sacred objects that had secured their victories. The message was clear: to take up the cross was to join a new holy army, one that marched under the same spiritual banner that had guided the great Christian emperors of the past. The lance was the ultimate proof that their cause was just and their victory divinely ordained. This belief reached its most dramatic and tragic expression in the People's Crusade. This was not an army of disciplined knights, but a desperate, fervent mob of peasants and paupers led by the charismatic preacher Peter the Hermit. They were fueled by an unshakable faith that God would provide for them and perform miracles on their behalf. And for them, the ultimate miracle would be the rediscovery of the Holy Lance itself. They truly believed that finding the sacred spear in the Holy Land would make their untrained, starving force invincible against the seasoned armies of the Muslim world. Their journey east was less a military campaign and more a passionate pilgrimage, powered by the conviction that the physical presence of the lance would shield them from harm and grant them Jerusalem. This collective hope reveals the spear's profound power as a unifier. It did not just promise victory, it offered a shared identity. A French peasant and an Italian merchant, who might otherwise have nothing in common, could both kneel before the same relic and feel they were part of one indivisible Christendom. The object became a focal point for a collective dream, a tangible representation of their shared faith and their shared destiny. When the official Crusader armies later laid siege to the city of Antioch, facing starvation and certain defeat, the reported discovery of the Holy Lance within the city walls was not just a morale boost. It was a divine intervention. The monk who claimed to have found it after a vision sparked a transformation in the Crusaders' spirit. Despair turned into fanatical confidence. They marched out of the city gates to face a much larger force, believing the spear marched with them, and their shocking victory was seen as another miraculous confirmation. In a world divided by 1,000 loyalties, the spear of destiny offered a single, unifying truth. It convinced thousands that they were not just soldiers, but instruments of a divine plan, and that this ancient iron point was the compass guiding them all. Yet for all its power to crown kings and heal the sick, the Holy Lance carried a terrifying warning. Its legend spoke of a relentless curse, a dark shadow that followed those who sought its power for selfish ambition or who held it without a sacred rite. This was no simple weapon of fate. It was a double-edged sword capable of elevating an emperor to glory just as easily as it could drag a tyrant into the abyss. The stories from the medieval chronicles are filled with cautionary tales. They speak of a minor German duke who managed to steal the relic from a cathedral treasury, hoping to claim the imperial crown for himself. Instead of victory, he found only chaos. His own son rose in rebellion against him. His lands were ravaged by a sudden plague, and within a year he died in a meaningless skirmish, the lance having long since been recovered by the church. His fate was seen as a divine judgment. The message was clear. The spear's power was not a tool to be seized. It was a sacred trust granted only to those whose will was aligned with a higher purpose. To use it for personal gain was to invite catastrophe. This belief in a conditional power reached its most chilling modern manifestation in the twisted obsession of Adolf Hitler. As a young man in Vienna, he first saw the Holy Lance in the Hofburg Museum, and he later described the experience as a moment of profound, almost mystical awakening. He became convinced that this was the same spear of destiny that had guided his historical idols, and he believed that by possessing it, he could control the very forces of history. When his armies marched into Austria in 1938, one of his very first acts was to seize the lance and have it transported to Nuremberg with the reverence of a holy relic. For Hitler, it was not an object of faith, but a key to occult power, a battery for his dark ambitions. He displayed it in a specially constructed chamber, and many of his inner circle reported his fanatical belief that as long as Germany held the spear, it could not lose the war. And yet, the legend of the curse held true. His possession of it was the ultimate act of sacrilege, a theft by a man whose intentions were the absolute opposite of the sacred trust it demanded. His 1,000-year Reich crumbled into ruin in just 12 years. In a final, poetic twist, it was American soldiers who recovered the lance from its hidden vault beneath Nuremberg Castle. The spear was taken from the Nazis on the very day, April 30th, 1945, that Adolf Hitler took his own life in his Berlin bunker. The timing was so precise that many saw it as the final, terrible working of the ancient curse. The man who had stolen the symbol of divine mandate had been utterly destroyed. What does this pattern of rise and fall tell us about the nature of the lance's power? The medieval stories and the modern tragedy point to the same moral lesson. The spear of destiny was never truly about raw, uncontrollable force. Its power was always conditional, hinging on the morality and intention of the one who held it. It could build an empire for a Charlemagne, but it would inevitably destroy a Hitler. The curse was not a separate magic, but the natural consequence of trying to wield a sacred object for a profane purpose. It was a divine check on human ambition, a reminder that some forces are meant to serve a destiny far greater than any one person. But the legend of a single, all-powerful spear shatters against a stubborn historical reality. There is not one holy lance, but several, each venerated for centuries and each with a compelling claim to be the true weapon that pierced the side of Christ. This is the great puzzle at the heart of the story. The most famous of these is the Hofburg lance, the very one held by emperors from Otto the Great to the Habsburgs and later seized by Hitler. Housed today in the Hofburg Palace in Vienna, its form is unmistakable. It appears as a typical Roman spearhead, but it has been dramatically transformed over time. A golden sleeve was added, bolted directly onto the iron blade, inscribed with the words, "The lance and nail of our Lord." This nail refers to a tiny iron pin driven through the top of the spearhead, said to be a nail from the true cross, fusing the power of two supreme relics into one sacred object. Its documented history in Europe is extensive, tracing back at least to the 10th century, which gives it a powerful provenance. Yet another claimant rests in the heart of the Vatican. The Rome lance, or the Lance of Longinus, is kept in St. Peter's Basilica. Its tradition is equally ancient, claiming it was brought to Rome by the Empress St. Helena, the mother of Constantine, who was famous for her quest to recover holy relics in the 4th century. This lance has a simpler form, lacking the ornate golden casing of its Viennese counterpart, and its story is one of continuous veneration by the highest authorities of the Church. Then there is the Echmiadze in lance treasured in Armenia. Its tradition holds that it was brought there by the Apostle Thaddeus, making its journey to the Caucasus region incredibly early. This version is often depicted in Armenian religious art and is central to the identity of one of the world's oldest Christian nations. With 3 major claimants, each supported by centuries of devout belief, how could anyone possibly determine which one is real? The modern world demanded a scientific answer. In the early 2000s, a team of researchers was granted rare permission to conduct a detailed analysis of the Hofburg lance. They performed carbon dating on the blade itself, a process that measures the decay of radioactive carbon to determine the age of organic materials, in this case, the minute particles of carbon within the iron. The results sent shockwaves through the historical community. The iron of the spearhead was dated to the 7th or 8th century, not the 1st. This meant the iconic Hofburg lance, the very object held by Charlemagne and Otto the Great, was a medieval artifact forged hundreds of years after the crucifixion. For skeptics, this was definitive proof that the spear was a clever forgery, a powerful prop created to legitimize the rule of the Holy Roman Emperors. But for believers, the scientific finding was not a refutation at all. They pointed to the golden sleeve and its inscription. The lance, they argued, was always understood to be a composite relic. The original, ancient iron point could have been remounted or repaired in the 8th century, with a new blade fashioned around a surviving fragment of the true 1st century metal. The carbon dating, in this view, merely confirmed the date of that repair, not the date of the relic's origin. The controversy only deepened the mystery rather than solving it. And in the medieval world that first worshipped these objects, such a debate would have been meaningless. The power of the Holy Lance never resided in its chemical composition or its metallurgical date. Its potency was a product of pure collective faith. If thousands of pilgrims were healed before it, if armies were inspired to victory by its presence, if emperors based their entire right to rule on its possession, then its power was undeniably real. The existence of multiple lances did not weaken the legend, it amplified it. Each spear became a local conduit to the same divine source, a focal point for the hopes and fears of an entire civilization. The true magic was not in the object itself, but in the unwavering belief it inspired. So which spear is the true one? Perhaps that is the wrong question to ask. The real power was never locked in the iron. It was held in the human heart. The power of the Holy Lance was not confined to royal treasuries or battlefield speeches. It was broadcast across the Christian world in brilliant color and shimmering gold leaf, captured in the pages of illuminated manuscripts and the vast spaces of cathedral mosaics. For the vast majority of people who could not read, these images were their Bible, their history book, and their newspaper all in one. A single, powerful illustration could convey the entire legend of the spear more effectively than any sermon. One of the most stunning examples comes from the Hortus Deliciarum, or Garden of Delights, a 12th century encyclopedia created by the Abbess Herad of Landsberg. In its pages, we find a complex illustration of the crucifixion, but it is far from a simple scene of mourning. The lance of Longinus is shown at the very center of the action, its tip buried in Christ's side. From the wound, 2 distinct streams flow out, one of blood and one of water, arching gracefully through the air to fall upon the head of a figure representing the church. This was not just art, it was theology in visual form. The image taught a profound lesson. The Holy Lance was the very instrument that released the fountain of grace upon which the church itself was built. Its power was active, not passive, continuing to pour out divine blessing upon the faithful. This visual metaphor transformed the spear from a historical artifact into a living source of spiritual energy. Other manuscripts went further, showing the lance in the hands of saints and emperors, actively performing miracles. We see Saint Longinus himself, no longer a Roman soldier but a radiant, haloed figure, holding the spear that once caused the wound, now shown as a badge of revelation. In these images, the lance often emits rays of golden light, a clear sign to any viewer that the object was charged with a palpable, heavenly force. It was a divine battery, visibly glowing with the power it contained. This symbolism was repeated on a grand scale in church mosaics and altar pieces. In the great basilicas where emperors were crowned, mosaics would depict rulers like Constantine and Charlemagne standing side by side with the saints, each of them holding the Holy Lance. The message was unambiguous. The emperor's authority came directly from the same divine source that sanctified the saints. The spear was the literal connecting rod between heaven and earth, between God and his chosen ruler. To challenge that ruler was to challenge the cosmic order itself. The art also vividly illustrated the spear's protective and destructive powers. In many battle scenes, the lance is shown held aloft by a praying emperor, while from its point, a torrent of divine fire rains down upon the enemy army, scattering them in terror. The enemy soldiers are often depicted as dark, grotesque figures, sometimes even with demonic features, making it clear that the battle was not just between two armies, but between the forces of light and darkness. The lance was the weapon that ensured light would always triumph. Every flowing line of blood, every golden ray of light, every cowering demon was a carefully crafted piece of propaganda. These images reassured the populace that their world was protected by a sacred object of immense power. They taught the illiterate peasant and the learned noble alike that the Holy Lance was real, its power was active, and its favor was the only thing standing between their civilization and chaos. The art did not just depict the legend, it actively sustained it generation after generation, making the spear's miraculous authority an undeniable fact of life. But the journey of the Holy Lance did not end on the battlefield or in the cathedral. It found its way into the most enchanting stories ever told, the world of knights, quests, and the ultimate medieval mystery, the Holy Grail. In the soaring romances of the Arthurian cycle, the spear was never a mere background object. It was a central character, a companion relic to the Grail itself, and its appearance was always a moment of profound, terrifying revelation. The most famous of these tales, the Quest del Saint Graal, describes a scene of breathtaking mystery within the enchanted Grail castle. The knight Galahad, the purest of all, witnesses a solemn procession. The Holy Grail is carried by an invisible hand, and following it is a nobleman holding a white spear. From its iron point, a single, steady drop of blood falls, flowing directly into the Grail. This image of the bleeding lance feeding the sacred cup became one of the most powerful and enduring symbols of the entire medieval era. The two relics were forever linked in a sacred dance. The Grail was the vessel, the receiver of divine grace and spiritual nourishment, but the lance was the active force, the instrument that released that grace through a perpetual act of sacrifice. It was the divine spark that activated the cup's power, a never-ending reminder that spiritual life was born from a physical wound. This symbolic relationship elevated the lance's meaning far beyond its historical role. It was no longer just a weapon that granted victory or a relic that cured disease. In the world of Arthurian romance, it became a test of the human soul. Only a knight of perfect purity like Galahad could witness the mystery of the bleeding spear without being struck down or driven mad. For others, the vision was a searing judgment, revealing their own inner flaws and spiritual failings. The quest for these relics was not a search for physical objects, but a journey toward self-knowledge and divine union. The lance, in this context, represented the painful but necessary price of revelation. True understanding, these stories taught, often comes with a wound. Divine power is not simply given, it is drawn from a continuous, sacred sacrifice. This intertwined destiny with the Grail cemented the spear's place in the popular imagination. It was no longer solely the property of emperors and bishops. It became the dream of every knight-errant, the ultimate goal of a spiritual adventure. The legends transformed the spear from a symbol of imperial authority into a beacon of personal redemption. To seek the Holy Lance was to seek a direct, transformative encounter with the divine, an experience that would forever change the one who beheld it. Why did this particular image of a bleeding spear resonate so deeply across centuries? Because it answered a fundamental human longing. It presented a universe where the physical and spiritual worlds were intimately connected, where a drop of blood from an ancient spear could hold the key to eternity. The story assured everyone, from the king on his throne to the peasant in his field, that the wounds of the past were not an end but a perpetual, living source of hope. This unwavering belief in the lance's power ignited a fire in the hearts of thousands, a devotion so intense it could reshape the map of Europe. For the medieval believer, a pilgrimage to see the Holy Lance was not a simple journey. It was the undertaking of a lifetime. People walked for hundreds of miles, braving bandits, disease, and treacherous mountain passes, all for a single, fleeting glimpse of the sacred Iron Point. Upon reaching the cathedral that housed it, they would join massive, weeping, praying crowds, all pressing forward for their moment before the reliquary. The air was thick with the smell of candles and incense, charged with a palpable sense of expectation, and the miracles were said to be immediate and undeniable. Chroniclers wrote of the lame throwing away their crutches, the mute suddenly crying out in praise, and the terminally ill rising from their stretchers completely healed. These were not quiet, private events. They were public spectacles that fueled the fervor of the entire crowd, each miracle serving as undeniable proof that the divine was present and active through this object. This raw, emotional power made the lance irresistible to rulers and rebels alike. Ambitious dukes and bishops knew that controlling the relic meant controlling the hearts of the people. This led to the shadowy, high-stakes world of relic theft. Holy theft, or fur to sacra, was not considered a sin if done with the right pious intentions. Monasteries and cathedrals would send out covert agents to liberate the lance from a rival institution, believing their own city was more deserving of its blessings. The stories of these thefts read like spiritual thrillers, with monks hiding the sacred spear in carts of hay or hollowed-out logs, smuggling it past guards to bring it to its new home. The arrival of the lance in a city was a moment of civic triumph, a sign that God had chosen them for special favor. This competition created powerful political and social movements. A city that possessed the lance saw its status soar. It became a mandatory stop on the pilgrimage routes, bringing immense wealth and influence. The local ruler could rally his entire population to his banner by simply reminding them that God's own spear was in their care. To fight for him was to fight for the relic itself. In this way, the Holy Lance transcended its physical form. It became a living idea, a focal point for faith, hope, and collective identity. It gave a fractured and often brutal world a shared purpose, a tangible connection to the divine that could unite peasants and princes in a single, awe-struck gaze. The true power was not in the iron, but in the sheer, unstoppable force of the belief it commanded. How many wars were fought, how many lives were uprooted, all for the chance to be near this one object. The lance did not just inspire devotion, it forged history itself in the furnace of that devotion. The age of emperors chosen by God was supposed to be over. The French Revolution had toppled the old order, and a new era of reason and secular power was dawning across Europe. Yet when Napoleon Bonaparte's armies marched into Vienna in 1805, one of his first and most specific commands was to locate the Holy Land. This was the man who crowned himself emperor, deliberately snubbing the Pope, declaring that he took his authority from the people and his own genius. Why would such a modern figure, a product of the Enlightenment, be so fixated on an ancient religious relic? his pursuit reveals a profound truth about the lance's legend. Napoleon understood that raw military force was not enough to secure a lasting empire. He needed legitimacy, a connection to a grand historical narrative that would make his rule feel inevitable. And what narrative was more powerful than that of the Spear of Destiny? He was not seeking its divine power in the medieval sense of a miracle. He was after its symbolic authority, the deep-seated psychological weight it carried in the European mind. By taking the lance, he aimed to perform a masterstroke of political theater. He would position himself as the direct successor to Charlemagne, the next great unifier of Europe, his right to rule sanctified not by the church, but by the possession of history's ultimate trophy. This was the secularization of the Relics' power. Its magic was being translated from a divine mandate into a tool of pure propaganda. Napoleon wanted to hold it up before the world and say, "The object that made Charlemagne invincible now belongs to me. Therefore, my empire is the next chapter in this destined story." It was a cold, calculated move to co-opt 1,000 years of mystical belief and bend it to his own political will. He knew that for millions, the sight of him with the lance would trigger an unconscious submission, a feeling that his rise was not just a matter of canons and constitutions, but of fate itself. Yet in a final, ironic twist, the lance eluded him. Austrian authorities, aware of its immense symbolic value, had secretly moved it from Vienna before the French troops arrived. Napoleon never laid his hands on it. His empire, which seemed so unstoppable, would eventually crumble on the frozen fields of Russia and the plains of Waterloo. For those who believed in the old stories, this was not a coincidence. The lance had protected itself from a man who saw it not as a sacred trust, but as a mere political tool. Napoleon's frantic search marks a pivotal moment in the lance's long story. It was the point where its power was stripped of its overtly religious wrapping and repackaged for a modern world, where symbols and perception became the new battlefield. If the spear's blessing could be manufactured, then what was to stop any ambitious leader from trying to claim it? The spear's journey did not end with kings and crusaders. It slipped into the shadows, becoming a central icon in the hidden world of esoteric traditions. Alchemists, those early seekers of physical and spiritual transformation, saw the holy lance not as a weapon of war, but as a powerful symbol of their great work. In their cryptic texts and intricate diagrams, the lance often appears as the piercing instrument that opens the prima materia, the base substance of creation. Just as the spear pierced the side of Christ to release a flood of grace, the alchemist's lance, whether real or symbolic, was used to pierce the veil of illusion, to break open the hardened shell of the self and release the golden, purified spirit within. This was a spiritual operation, a violent and necessary act of dissolution that had to occur before true enlightenment could dawn. The lance represented the moment of profound crisis that precedes rebirth. In other mystical circles, the spear took on an even grander cosmic role. It became identified with the axis mundi, the world tree, the central pillar that connects heaven, earth, and the underworld. It was the ultimate conduit, a divine lightning rod channeling power between realms. This belief transformed the physical object into a metaphysical key, a tool for ascending to higher states of consciousness or for summoning energies from the depths. A mystic meditating on the spear was not thinking of a historical artifact. He was focusing on a living symbol of his own spiritual spine, the central channel through which divine energy could rise from the base of his being to the crown of his head, achieving a personal union with the Absolute. This reinterpretation reached its most dangerous and distorted form in the early 20th century. Secret societies like the Thule Society, a direct precursor to the Nazi Party, voraciously consumed these esoteric ideas and twisted them to fit a new, terrifying ideology. For them, the Christian story was a corruption of a purer, older Aryan truth. They systematically divorced the Holy Lance from its origins, stripping away the narrative of Longinus and the crucifixion. In their hands, it was no longer the spear that confirmed Christ's divinity. It was an ancient Atlantean power object, a holy relic of a lost Hyperborean race of supermen. Its power was not divine grace, but a raw, racial energy that could be harnessed only by those of pure blood. This dark mythology re-enchanted the lance with a new and malevolent purpose. It became the ultimate prize in their quest to prove the superiority and destiny of the Aryan people. They believed that by possessing it, they could tap into a primal, pre-Christian source of power and use it to forge their thousand-year Reich. This occult obsession directly fueled Adolf Hitler's very personal and fanatical quest for the spear, transforming a medieval Christian relic into the centerpiece of a pagan, racist gospel. The object that once symbolized universal salvation was now being used to justify a doctrine of hatred and extermination. How did a symbol of spiritual transformation become a tool for such profound darkness? The answer lies in the nature of belief itself, a force that can be channeled toward both light and shadow, and the Holy Lance proved to be a perfect vessel for either purpose. Adolf Hitler's obsession with the Holy Lance was not a passing curiosity. It was a core component of his twisted worldview. As a destitute young artist in Vienna, he first encountered the spear in the Hofburg Museum, and he later described the moment as a kind of spiritual seizure. He stood transfixed before the display case, convinced he was in the presence of the same spear of destiny that had guided his historical idol, Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. But in Hitler's mind, the relic's power was not rooted in Christian grace. He and his inner circle of occultists, particularly those in the Thule Society, had reinvented its legend. They stripped it of its connection to Christ and recast it as an ancient Aryan power object, a holy relic from a lost Nordic civilization. For them, its magic was a raw, racial force that could be harnessed only by the pure-blooded. This belief became a driving force behind his political and military strategy. When German troops marched into Austria in March of 1938, the Anschluss was not just a political annexation. For Hitler, it was a sacred heist. One of his very first acts was to secure the Holy Lance. He ordered it transported from Vienna to Nuremberg with the meticulous care of a holy rite. The spear was installed in the city's St. Catherine's Church, which was secretly converted into a Nazi shrine. It was displayed in a specially constructed chamber, lit dramatically and guarded around the clock. Hitler visited it privately, and his closest associates reported his fanatical conviction that as long as Germany physically possessed the lance, the Third Reich could not be defeated. He genuinely believed it was the key to world domination, a supernatural battery for his dark ambitions. The object that had once symbolized divine mandate for Holy Roman emperors was now the centerpiece of a pagan, racist gospel. As the war turned against Germany, the lance's protection became even more crucial to Nazi ideology. In 1944, as Allied bombs began to devastate German cities, the regime ordered the lance, along with the rest of the Reich's stolen treasure, hidden in a specially constructed vault deep beneath Nuremberg Castle. They believed its power would be safe there, a last-ditch magical defense for a crumbling empire. But the legend's dark echo was about to be heard once more. In the final days of the war, it was the United States Third Army, led by the hard-charging General George S. Patton, who fought their way into Nuremberg. Patton was a man deeply fascinated by history and destiny, and he was acutely aware of the legend of the Spear of Destiny. He gave explicit orders to locate the secret vault. On the 30th of April 1945, American combat engineers, using explosives to blast through reinforced concrete, broke into the hidden chamber. There, amidst piles of gold and artwork, they found the Holy Lance resting in its simple wooden crate. In a moment of chilling synchronicity that believers would later call the working of the ancient curse, the lance was recovered by American forces on the very same day that Adolf Hitler, surrounded by the ruins of his ambitions, took his own life in his Berlin bunker. The man who had stolen the symbol of divine mandate had been utterly destroyed. His reign ended precisely when the spear left his possession. General Patton was reportedly shaken by the discovery and the weight of its history. He saw it as a tangible link to the great commanders of the past, and he understood the profound psychological power it had held over his enemy. This entire episode stands as a terrifyingly modern case study. It proves that the medieval superstitions surrounding the lance's power did not fade away with the Age of Reason. They persisted, mutated, and were weaponized in the 20th century, directly influencing the actions of one of history's most destructive figures. The spear's curse, it seems, was all too real for those who sought its power with a corrupt and arrogant heart. The spear that crowned emperors now rests behind glass, a museum piece in Vienna's Hofburg Palace. This is the final chapter of the Hofburg Lance's physical journey, a trail of safekeeping and theft that stretches across centuries. After the fall of the Holy Roman Empire, the lance lost its political role but none of its mystique. It became a prized possession of the Habsburg dynasty, who kept it in their private treasury, a sacred heirloom locked away from public view. Yet its fame made it a target during every major conflict. When Napoleon's armies entered Vienna in 1805, Austrian officials, knowing the French emperor's desire for the relic, secretly moved it to safety. It was a game of cat and mouse with the highest stakes, a desperate attempt to deny a conqueror the symbol he craved for his own legitimacy. The lance was shuttled between remote monasteries and hidden vaults, its guardians understanding that they protected not just an artifact but a piece of the world's soul. It always returned to Vienna, but its security was temporary. The 20th century brought new perils. During the Second World War, as Allied bombing raids intensified, the Nazis hid the lance and the entire imperial treasure in a specially constructed, bomb-proof vault deep beneath Nuremberg Castle. It was there that American soldiers recovered it in April 1945, an event that coincided so perfectly with Hitler's death it seemed to confirm the ancient curse. After the war, the lance was returned to Austrian custody, finding its permanent home in the Weltliche Schatzkammer, the secular treasury of the Hofburg Palace. There it sits today, no longer wielded in battle or held high at coronations, but silently drawing thousands of visitors who come to stand before the very object that shaped so many legends. Yet the Hofburg lance is not alone. In Rome, within the grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica, another holy lance is venerated. Its tradition claims it was brought to the city by Saint Helena, the mother of Constantine, in the 4th century. This version lacks the golden sleeve of its Viennese counterpart, presenting a simpler, more austere form. And in Armenia, the Echmiadzin in lance is treasured as a national relic, its story woven into the identity of one of the world's oldest Christian nations. 3 spears, 3 traditions, all pointing back to the same moment in time. Seeing them today displayed in quiet museums or hushed chapels, it is easy to forget the storms they have weathered. These objects have been fought over, stolen, hidden, and worshipped. They have been carried in triumph through city streets and smuggled in the dead of night. Their physical journey from the medieval world to the modern age is a history of human obsession written in metal and wood. They are tangible bridges to a past where faith could move armies and a single point of iron could hold the weight of an empire's destiny. So the next time you see a photograph of the Hofburg lance in its display case, remember that you are not just looking at an ancient artifact. You are looking at a silent witness to 1,000 years of hope, fear, and the unshakable human desire to touch the divine. Modern science has attempted to weigh this ancient faith on its own empirical scales. In the year 2003, a team of researchers was granted an unprecedented opportunity. They were allowed to perform a detailed scientific analysis on the most famous of the lances, the Hofburg spear, removing it from its case and subjecting it to the most advanced technology available. The focus of their examination was not just the blade, but the tiny iron pin driven through its top, the one the golden sleeve identified as a nail from the true cross. Using carbon dating, a process that measures radioactive decay to determine the age of ancient materials, they made a startling discovery. The main body of the spearhead was dated to the 7th or 8th century, not the 1st. This meant the iconic weapon, the very object held by Charlemagne, was forged hundreds of years after the crucifixion. For skeptics, this was the final, definitive proof. The Holy Lance was a medieval fabrication, a brilliantly conceived political tool created to legitimize the rule of emperors by connecting them to a sacred past they had no physical claim to. The power, they argued, was always an illusion, a placebo effect on a continental scale. Yet for many believers, the scientific findings did not shatter the legend. They enriched it. They pointed to the composite nature of the relic itself. The original 1st century point, they suggested, could have been a smaller, more fragile piece of iron that was later repaired or remounted in the Carolingian era. The new, larger blade was fashioned around a surviving fragment of the true metal, with the holy nail carefully inserted to sanctify the entire reconstruction. In this view, the carbon dating merely confirmed the moment of a great repair, a reverent act of preservation, not the date of the relic's origin. The scientific data created a fascinating tension, a standoff between two different ways of knowing the world. One relies on testable facts and verifiable dates. The other operates on the unshakable ground of spiritual truth and miraculous tradition. The lance's enduring power highlights a profound truth. Faith exists in a realm that is fundamentally immune to empirical disproof. You cannot carbon date a prayer. You cannot analyze the chemical composition of a miracle. The thousands of pilgrims who reported healings, the armies that fought with newfound courage, the emperors who built their legitimacy upon its presence, their experiences constituted a different kind of evidence, one that was real and powerful in its consequences, regardless of the metal's age. So did science debunk the spear of destiny, or did it simply reveal that its true essence was never locked in the iron at all, but in the timeless and unmeasurable power of human belief? The true power of the Holy Lance was not magical, but deeply, fundamentally human. In a world shadowed by plague, famine, and constant uncertainty, the medieval mind craved a tangible link to the divine, a physical object to bridge the terrifying gap between heaven and earth. Relics like the spear answered this profound psychological need. They transformed an abstract, all-powerful God into a presence you could almost touch, a force you could stand before and petition directly. This was not simple superstition. It was a logical response to a life where death was a constant companion and science offered few answers. If you could not understand the why behind a pandemic, you could at least grasp the hope offered by a sacred point of iron believed to hold the very essence of Christ's sacrifice. The lance made the immense power of salvation feel local, immediate, and accessible. This connection operated on principles that feel instinctive even today. One is sympathetic magic, the idea that things once in contact continue to influence each other across time and distance. The Holy Lance had touched the body of Christ. Therefore, it was permanently charged with his divine essence, a spiritual battery that could discharge miracles for centuries. A more potent concept was contagion, the belief that the power of a holy person, a saint or the Messiah himself, permanently resided in their physical remains or the objects they owned. This power was thought to be transmissible, almost like a spiritual charge. By touching the reliquary that housed the lance, a pilgrim was not just showing respect. They were attempting to draw a tiny spark of that sanctity into their own ailing body or troubled soul. The relic was a direct conduit, a wire connecting them to the ultimate source of power. This belief transformed the spear into a powerful focal point for an entire community's collective emotions. It channeled hope for the sick who traveled for weeks for a chance at a cure. It focused the fear of a city under siege, which processed the relic through its streets to form a spiritual shield. It embodied the pride of an empire, proving to its people that God had chosen their king. And because so many people believed so fervently in its power, that power often became a self-fulfilling prophecy. An army that marched with the lance, convinced of its own invincibility, fought with a ferocity and cohesion that could indeed turn the tide of battle. A pilgrim who experienced a healing after fervent prayer before the relic had their faith confirmed, strengthening the belief of everyone who heard their story. The lance worked because millions of people willed it to work, their collective conviction creating a feedback loop of miracle and myth. Its real magic was not in the iron, but in the human heart's incredible capacity to shape reality through the sheer force of belief. If an object can inspire such unity of purpose, does the source of its power truly matter, or is the outcome itself the only miracle that counts? The legend of the Holy Lance has escaped the pages of history to find a new kind of immortality on the silver screen and in digital worlds. Perhaps its most famous modern appearance came in the classic adventure film, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Here, the Spear of Destiny is reimagined not as a standalone relic, but as one of the tests guarding the path to the Holy Grail itself. A lone knight warns Indiana Jones that only the penitent man shall pass, and Jones must kneel to avoid a diabolical blade that sweeps through the chamber. This cinematic moment brilliantly captures the relic's enduring mystique, framing it as a lethal, divine obstacle. The movie translates the spear's ancient power into a physical challenge, teaching a new generation that this was an object of such immense significance that it could protect the cup of Christ. By weaving it into a blockbuster narrative of quests and traps, the film cemented the Holy Lance in the popular imagination as a key piece of the ultimate treasure hunt, its power both literal and symbolic. This cultural migration extends far beyond Hollywood. In the sprawling universes of video games, the lance is frequently endowed with immense magical or even super-technological properties. In the Final Fantasy series, the weapon often appears as the Dragon Lance or the Holy Lance, a powerful piece of equipment that grants heroes enhanced abilities against monstrous foes. Here, its sacred origin is translated into raw gameplay stats, a quantifiable power-up for the player. The Assassin's Creed franchise, known for blending historical conspiracies with sci-fi elements, presents the spear as a piece of Eden, an advanced artifact from a precursor civilization. This ingenious reinterpretation strips the object of its overt Christian context and recasts its miracles as misunderstood advanced technology. It asks a compelling question: what if the divine power that blessed emperors was actually a form of lost science? This reframing keeps the core idea of the lance's unparalleled power intact while making it relevant for a more secular, technologically curious audience. Even Japanese anime and manga have eagerly adopted the spear, often amplifying its mystical attributes to dramatic new heights. In various series, the Lance of Longinus is depicted as a weapon capable of shattering celestial barriers or sealing away apocalyptic entities. Its portrayal is less about historical faith and more about raw, universe-altering energy, a tool for characters who operate on a godlike scale. These creative liberties are not a distortion of the legend, but a continuation of it. For centuries, the story of the spear evolved as different cultures and rulers added their own layers of meaning. The medieval chroniclers, the Habsburg emperors, and now the game designers and filmmakers are all part of the same timeless process. They are taking an ancient symbol and remolding it to reflect contemporary fears, hopes, and fascinations. The core narrative remains unchanged, an object of immense power that can change the world, but its context shifts from the divine right of kings to the stats of a digital hero or the plot device in a global conspiracy. This constant reinvention ensures the Holy Lance never becomes a dusty museum piece in our collective mind. It remains a living, breathing part of our storytelling, a versatile symbol that can represent anything from divine judgment to technological supremacy. Every time a player equips the Holy Lance in a role-playing game or a movie hero faces its gleaming point, the ancient legend is reforged for a new audience. The question is no longer whether the spear is physically real, but why its story remains so irresistibly powerful. What does our endless retelling of this particular myth reveal about our own perpetual longing for a key that can unlock destiny itself? Centuries have passed, yet the story of the Holy Lance refuses to fade into the quiet pages of history. Its grip on our imagination is as potent today as it was in the age of Charlemagne, a testament to the powerful alchemy of its ingredients. Here we find a perfect fusion of documented history and impenetrable mystery, of profound faith and raw, worldly power. We can trace its ownership through royal inventories and coronation records, placing it firmly in the hands of verifiable historical figures. Yet its origin story exists in the realm of the miraculous, a divine event that forever separates it from any other ancient artifact. This unresolved tension is the very source of its enduring appeal. We are presented with an object that is both real and unreal, a piece of iron you can see in a Vienna museum that is simultaneously believed to have tapped into the power of creation itself. It forces us to confront the ultimate question of belief. What if a single object could truly channel divine will into human history? The lance is the ultimate what if, a tangible key to a door we can never fully open, and that tantalizing possibility is what keeps us coming back generation after generation. More than a relic, it has become a universal symbol for some of our deepest human yearnings. It represents our search for meaning in a chaotic world, a desire to believe that events are not random but part of a grand, purposeful design. For the medieval peasant, it was a promise of divine protection against plague and famine. For the modern individual, it remains a powerful metaphor for the hope that there is a force for good actively intervening in our world. It speaks to our ambition to leave a mark on history, to be more than just a fleeting presence. The emperors who wielded it were not just seeking military victory, they were seeking validation that their lives and reigns mattered on a cosmic scale. The Holy Lance offered them and offers us a story in which a single person, by possessing the right key, can alter the destiny of the world. Ultimately, the secret power of the Holy Lance may have nothing to do with magic or miracles locked within its iron. Its true, world-altering force has always been its unparalleled ability to inspire. It inspired armies to fight with superhuman courage, pilgrims to journey across continents for a chance at grace, and artists to create some of the most beautiful works of the medieval world. It inspired both profound piety and devastating ambition, proving that the same symbol can be a vessel for our highest aspirations and our most dangerous obsessions. The lance is a mirror reflecting our own perpetual need for wonder, for a connection to something greater than ourselves. Its legend persists not because we have proven its power, but because we have never stopped needing the story it tells. From the promise of invincibility on the battlefield to the miraculous touch that could heal the sick, from the visions of prophecy that guided kings to the spiritual shield that guarded against darkness, the journey of the Holy Lance is a 2,000-year saga of human aspiration. It is a story that reveals less about a divine object and more about our own profound need to find meaning in a chaotic world. Emperors from Constantine to Charlemagne, crusaders marching to Jerusalem, and even modern dictators all reached for this one object, convinced it was the key to shaping destiny. Their quests, their wars, and their fervent prayers were not just about possessing a piece of iron. They were about possessing a story, a tangible link to a power greater than themselves. This legend has weathered the rise and fall of empires, the scrutiny of science, and the shifting tides of belief, yet its grip on our imagination remains unbroken. Its true, enduring secret was never a magical force locked within the metal. It was always the unparalleled ability to inspire, to unite, and to compel humanity to reach for the impossible. So we are left with that final, haunting question, a mystery that has echoed through the centuries. In the end, does the power reside in the lance itself, or in the unwavering belief of those who hold it? What do you think lies at the heart of this ancient legend? Share your own thoughts on this eternal mystery in the comments below. If this journey through the secrets of the Spear of Destiny captivated you, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden stories that have shaped our world.